non-commodity costs on an energy invoice are becoming increasingly important. They're becoming an increasing share of the overall invoice. So they're basically everything that isn't the juice or the commodity itself. So principally grid and network costs, taxes and levies, metering charges, and other third-party access costs that make up the energy invoice. And I think it's important to look at why this has really evolved over the last kind of 10 to 15 years. There's been a huge amount of market change in the European market in relation to, for example, the need to turn away from fossil fuel and in some cases nuclear generation towards more low carbon technologies. That's partly been driven by things like the Fukushima disaster that created policy responses to bring nuclear plants forward for closure. Also, generally, the climate change agenda, the need to reduce the amount of carbon from energy generation. So that low carbon transition has necessitated a lot of renewable energy subsidy support in the early stages to support the technology and to make sure it can grow and reach economies of scale. At the same time, we've also had another challenge across European energy networks where the grids have been aging, crumbling, you might say, in some cases, and have been badly in need of investment to replace aging infrastructure, aging power stations in some cases, partly to make them fit for the addition of low carbon generation and the more two-way power system we see where consumers are becoming much more dynamic and involved in the process rather than historically a top-down model from supplier to consumer. So all of that investment and renewable policy support has created a market driver where we're seeing increased non-commodity costs coming through in the invoices. For example, where bill payers are paying the cost of the renewable subsidies for the new low carbon technologies and are also paying the cost in higher grid charges for the reinvestment and infrastructure improvements that we've seen. As low carbon technologies have grown in the energy mix, they've also created new challenges around their intermittency, the fact that the wind isn't always blowing, the sun isn't always shining. And so from that perspective, we also have to have backup generation capacity that's there when the natural resources aren't being kind to the generation system. And that in itself creates a cost because natural gas or coal-fired power stations being used only for backup are quite expensive to maintain and keep open and have needed incentives in order to be available, whether that comes through capacity payments, capacity markets or whatever. So that has increased, again, these non-commodity charges in terms of the payment for those incentives.